Good day everyone. So once again, I am here to discuss about Module 3 or the last module for this subject, Jack 101, Understanding the Self. No, I apologize for this late video lecture for there have been some things that I need to complete last week and the previous weeks. So basically, my schedule last week was very hectic and all, daghang webinars, daghang requirements nga dapat ipasa, and I'm very sorry that this came out late. Okay, and I hope you guys understand. Um, However, let's just get straight to the video lecture, no? For this topic, we will be talking about stress and coping. Stress, as we all know, have been experienced not just by you, but all other people around the world, especially during these trying times. No, you have been subjected to stress because of the activities, quizzes, exams that your class demands you to do. Okay, teachers as well are very much stressed for their work. Okay, the things that we need to check and other things outside school pod, we really have to tend it as well. Kamo man pud na pod may mga things that needs to be given attention to outside pod sa kanang pagskwela nato. Okay? However, again, dili lang ang students o dili lang ang teachers ang naka-experience of stress. Okay, other people as well experience stress. Stress is something that can be felt, that can be observed, no, in general. Okay, in the general population. Okay, we experience stress in a different way compared to other people. Okay, so my stress is quite different to your stress and other people as well. But the bottom line is we are stressed individuals during these trying times, no? And we have also different ways of coping to stress. So for this video lecture, I will be discussing to you the nature of stress, no? The nature of stress and the different ways of coping to stress and what are those things that we thought that actually helps us cope with stress but it is not actually working. Okay, so that is what we will be discussing for this video lecture. Okay, so what is stress? Stress are emotional and physiological process that occurs as individuals try to adjust to or deal with stressors. Okay, let us define this definitions muna before we go in depth with that is stress really. Stressors are environmental circumstances that disrupt or threaten to disrupt people's daily functioning and causes people to make adjustments. Stress reactions are the physical, psychological, and behavioral responses that occur in the face of stressors. Okay. Stress again. Stress are caused by stressors, and your stress reactions are those responses brought about by the stressors, which is in response to the stress that you experience. Okay, so these are three different things. Okay, so I hope that is quite sabotation sa inyo ha. Stress is some kind of a pressure sa ato, no? It is some kind of a push for us. Okay? So stress really demands us greatly as an individual and too much stress is actually not healthy at all sa atua. Okay? There are some literature or references that actually tells us that stress is actually somewhat the same with motivation, inspiration, and all of those things. Basically, a little bit of stress is actually beneficial sa tao because it pushes an individual to adjust well to a certain situation. However, too much stress is what makes stress very destructive or very dangerous. Okay? So, did you know as well that stress is actually both actually has two types or two different types, good stress and a bad stress. Okay? So there are two types of stress. The first type is eustress or this is positive stress. This is the good type of stress, no? Because it motivates or focuses energy. It is short term It is perceived as within our coping abilities. It feels exciting and it also improves performance. This is what I tell you, that some references actually talks about that stress could be something beneficial to a person. It could be a motivational factor. So what are the possible stressors that could cause you stress sa individual? Okay, for example, when you ace a when you ace an exam, okay, when you are the top score of your exam, that is a possible stressor that causes you stress. Okay, or feeling of motivation, 'di ba? Unsa pa man, promotion sa trabaho. Okay, kana siya. Marriage, I don't know if marriage kay kuan ba na siya, or anything that actually alleviates or kana bitawng lightens up your mood, and in the end either motivates you to do it better or improves your performance as well. Okay. So the stress, so that is the kind of stress that is positive or good thing. How, and this is like not really highlighted no as a type of not really highlighted type of stress, because what is really highlighted is actually the stress. This is the stress that we are actually trying to tawagan nyo take into account for this um video lecture. Okay, we try to address in this lecture. This stress is a negative stress. No, this is the kind of stress that we actually talk about every time that we are feeling stressed. No, so I am under distress. Okay, or the negative stress. No, it causes anxiety or concern. It can be short term, but it could also be long term. Okay, stress is actually could actually be debilitating to an individual. We will talk about that later. It is perceived as outside of our coping abilities. Outside, meaning to say, it is quite likely that there is a possibility that we will be having difficulties when it comes to handling the stressor or this kind of stress. Okay, it usually feels unpleasant, it doesn't do you good, it decreases performance of an individual, and it can also lead to mental and physical problems. So what are these following these stresses? Okay, so you already know. No, deadlines are kind of stressors. Deadlines sa paman kana mga calamities, death of a loved one, or those negative things that we experiences that we see as something bitaw that is hurtful, or we see that is something destructive sa tua. Those stressors is, if we perceive them as a negative stressor, then basically they will be distressful, or they will cause distress sa tua. Okay, so we have two types, we have eustress and we have distress. Okay, na gets? Okay, so there are also what we call as conflict induced stress, no? So conflict is a kind of stressor in which some goals can only be satisfied at the expense of others. A conflict is where kana bitong kuan, you have to weigh things, no, you have to weigh the pros and cons. Okay, inana na siya usually. And when we are under that kind of stress, or when we are under that conflict, basically it induces stress, or it promotes stress sa atua. Okay. There are four major types of motivational conflicts. First is the approach conflict, which results when a person is caught between two or more alternatives, each of which is positive or potentially reinforcing. Okay, this is an approach conflict is like, for example, situation nga example, no? Nagtake ka og test sa UP og sa Ateneo, no? Sa UP og sa Ateneo. And then it turns out nakapasar ka sa UP og sa Ateneo. So approach conflict then kicks in ana siya nga situation. Okay? Asa man ko musulod ani, sa Ateneo or sa UP? Both are good schools when it comes to kanang pagtudlo. Okay, so the thing here is that what gives you stress is to choose between the two. Asa man imong pilion ana? That is approach. Okay? 'Di ba? So hala kada siya naibog siya nako. Kadi pud siya naibog pud nako nya. Hala gwapo man sila. Wala asa man akong gwapa man ni siga. Kinsa man akong kuano na nila. Okay. So that is an example of an approach conflict. Okay? So you are given two possible choices in which both choices are actually positively reinforcing. Okay? So next is we have avoidance conflict. A person is faced with several alternatives, each of which is negative or punishing in some way. So this is quite the contrast sa approach. Kung ang approach is between two alternatives that is positively reinforcing, ang avoidance is punishing in some way. Okay. So, for example, sa avoidance, maingon ni mo mama nga, maingon ni mama, Red! Red! Asa man ni mo na? Sa mga maglampaso ka, manghugas kag plato. Ano siya. So, both dili ka ganahan. You want to avoid both situations. You don't want to make lampaso and you also don't want to make hugas sa plato. However, you cannot do that because if wala kay pilion, masagpaan man pud ka ni mama. So asa man ka manghugas og plato, mang manghugas og plato, manglampaso, sagpa or grounded ka for a week. Okay, more something ana. No, so in avoidance conflict, you just have to be able to weigh who is the lesser evil sa imo ang choices, no? Or kinsa ang lesser bitog mahatag og discomfort sa imuha. Siguro sagpa na lang ko, sir, oy, kay para isa ray sakit. Murag ana kas ara ba sagpa o pa man na dayon, no, di ba? Pero sagpa pero pili man gihapon ka. So, wala gihapon kay wala gihapon kay kuan takas, no? Okay, wait lang sabi. I'll just turn off my ano kay daghan kay magtingog. Okay. Anyway, so I hope nag-na-excellent siguro to. Sorry kayo. Okay, here. Okay, kita ninyo akong kuhan. Okay, so next type is approach avoidance conflict. So there is only one goal a person would like to reach. Okay, naara siya isa ka buok, but at the same time would like to avoid as well. Okay, so kani siya isa na gyud ang kuan. However, it is dari na to siya moingon na to nga it could give you a positive or it could give you the pros and the cons. Okay, when you actually have this conflict, one thing is actually giving you a pro and a con or positive things or a consequence. Okay, so there is only one goal a person would like to reach but at the same time would like to avoid. Okay, so asa man ka. Okay, for example, no, kanang sa mga best example gana ning approach avoidance kay kanang for example nag-work na ka, okay, and then nice na kaayo imuhang work, no, and then ana imo ang kuan ana imuhang boss, and then you are a single parent, no, nya mo ana din imuhang boss dayon nga mo na din imuhang boss nga okay, so ikaw kay best man ka nga ano employee i-promote ta ka ana so from kani siya himuon ta kang manager, okay, pero ay ra ka ma-promote kung mosugot ka nga mobalhin ka sa laing branch which is for example taga Davao ka unya ibalhin ka og ay taga Iligan ka unya ibalhin ta ka og ibalhin ta ka og New Zealand oh kana siya so no? So, na ako sa Iligan, iya ibalhin ko sa New Zealand. O, di ba, nice kaayo. Nice kaayo siya nga, kuan. Nice kaayo siya nga, opportunity. However, moana din ang imuhang kuan, bossing, gani lang, dili sa nimo, madala imuhang family. Okay, so you are now having this dilemma or conflict, no? You are promoted, however, you must be transferred in a different country dili pa gid mo madala imong family. So you have this goal that you would like to reach but at the same time you also would like to avoid because you are that kind of person nga very kuan bitaw very family oriented, so medyo sakit gud sa imong nga mo mo layo sa imong family. Okay, so that is an approach avoidance conflict. Okay, next we have is multiple approach avoidance conflict. No, so this result when a person is faced with a number of alternatives, each of which is in some way both positive and negative. So kani siya, you have two choices, wherein the two choices now kay both positive and negative ang hatag. Okay, so mas lisod di multiple approach avoidance conflict. No? So, for example, murag asa man ka, no? Sa kuan, sa gwapo nga bahug-baba or sa pangit pero humot. O kuno siya. Ama ka sa gwapo nga baho or sa pangit nga humot. O ano siya. Murag inana multiple approach avoidance, no? Kanang kung papilion kag sakyanan asa man ka sa mura pero kanang dili ra kay na nakapaspas ang dagan or dili ka sa mahal nga paspas kay mudagan o kanang inana. Oo, so that is a multiple approach avoidance nga conflict. Daghan tag ma-experience ana. No, daghan tag ma-experience ana. Okay. Now, this might seem, my examples might seem kind of bitang funny or something jokey, but I tell you, there are times that we might really experience these kinds of things. Mm. And when we are under these kinds of conflict, basically, we will be putting ourselves under stress, and that is when nadayon na ay dilemma na to nga ma-experience, whether physically or emotionally. Okay, so that is some examples of conflict-induced stress. I hope that is clear, okay? Okay, so what are the different stress responses? Okay, physical responses. According to the General Adaptation Syndrome, there are three-stage pattern daw of physical responses to any lasting stressor. Okay, so first stage is the alarm stage. This is the immediate reaction when an individual is faced with a stressor. So this is the fight or flight nga syndrome. Okay, to mobilize the body for rapid action. Okay. So, unsa gyud ang fight or flight, di ba? It's either you fight or you go bye-bye. Okay? For example, ay imong stressor is nabahaan mo or grabe kaayo ang baha or unsa ba kana dira kanang naibagyo. Okay? So, and then medyo naa mo sa kaning delikado nga lugar. So, you are already in alarm. So, it's either fight or flight. So, basically, your body will be heightened. Okay? Mangita na din mo og um nangita na dahil mo og ano mga ways, no, like sa ana na dayon. Okay, so persistent stressors trigger the second stage or the resistance stage. The signs of initial alarm subsides as the body settles in the signs of initial alarm subsides as the body settles in to combat the stressor on a long-term basis. Okay, kani siya, usually, some people, alarm stage pa lang daan from fight or flight nga syndrome, no? From fight or flight nga syndrome, mo slow down na dayon na sila into a rest and digest na dayon. Ang ilang rest and digest system, mo na po din ay magpakalma sa ilaha. Okay, basically, ma-okay na dayon sila. However, that is not true to most people or to other people because sometimes stressors persists. Okay, and persistent stressors triggers the resistance stage. Okay, this is where the body then tries to counter the debilitating effect of that stressor on a longer basis. Okay, no? Because there are things that this stressor gives to an individual. We will be discussing that later. And these are the things that this resistance stage tries to combat. Okay. So, after that, if the stressors still continue, the resistance stage eventually depletes biochemical stores, and the third stage of exhaustion results into exhaustion or the exhaustion stage. No, this is the physical wear and tear take its toll, producing disease of adaptation such as heart disease, arthritis, codes, and so on. So that is really true, no, na usually, but when we are stressed, we are very much susceptible. If ever man gani dili na to madilang ato ang stress, ang distress nato, we are very much susceptible to sakit. These are not just physical nga sakit, ha, even though kani siya nga physical responses ni sa lawas, but stressors could also um be a factor of developing mental health problems. Okay. So, yeah. So, from alarm to resistance, pag dili pa gani makuha sa alarm, dito ta sa resistance. Pag dili makuha sa resistance, exhaustion ang mahitabo. Okay? Another kind of response is the psychological response. Okay, so we have emotional changes. So, stress responses may include fear, anger, irritability, and anxiety. However, these are usually temporary. 'Di ba? Because of a certain stress, we fear because of a certain stressor, we feel stress, we feel fear. Okay? We feel irritated. We feel anxiety. Okay, cognitive changes. Stress responses may also include reduced ability to concentrate, think clearly, or even remember accurately. Okay, so remember what I said to you earlier about kaning persistent stressors. Okay, persistent stressors, as what I told you, have also different effect, not just physically sa ato ang lawas, no, but also mentally. One of which is ruminative thinking. It is the recurring intrusion of thoughts about stressful events. This is ruminative thinking is not really remembering per se, because ruminative thinking is actually the kind of the recurrence of thoughts bitaw nga wala nimo tuyo, like kanang matulog lang ka madumduman nimo kalit, like kalit-kalit lang, no, you ruminate about it. Okay, kana bitong dili nimo tuyoon pero madumduman gid nimo siya. Okay, that is ruminative thinking. You kind of remember the things that has happened before, or what the stressor is about. Okay, that is ruminative thinking. That is one of the effects or cognitive effects of a stressor. Okay, so stress responses, or the response of a stressor. Okay, so catastrophizing, dwelling on and overemphasizing possible negative consequences of events, which interferes with cognitive abilities and intensifies emotional and physiological arousal. Catastrophizing, overgeneralizing things. Okay, kana bitong pasubraan o huna na dahil mag overthinking, kana dili overgeneralizing, overthinking of things. Okay, so we are like overthinking everything, like hala kani siya mahitabo na punig balik, dapat we have to be ready, ana-ana. Okay, to the extent that you are only indulge with that kind of thought, wherein in fact it is already unhealthy sa imuha, because it already interferes your sense of seeing reality. Kaya dito naman ka nag-focus sa imuhang nahitabo, dito naman ka nag-overthink ug ayo sa stressor nga imuhang na-experience. That is quite sad. Okay, so that is some responses, cognitive responses, no? We also have overarousal. So from stressors, overarousal from stressors, which tends to limit attention and increase the tendency to rely on mental states. Well-learned but not always efficient ways of approaching problems, and functional fixedness. The tendency to use objects for only one purpose. Overarousal includes kuan bitaw kana bitong over na over dili hypervigilance kana siya, dili overvigilance. Hypervigilance, you become vigilant most of the time, you have heightened attention. Okay, you have really heightened attention, you become paranoid. Okay, kana siya, usually mahitabo. Okay, so impaired decision-making skills can also arise due to stressors because of many disturbances involving conflicting thoughts and emotions. So basically, impaired decision-making is the bottom line or the result of all of these stress responses. No, when you ruminate, when you overthink, and when you become hypervigilant, your decision-making will basically be impaired. Okay, so yeah, that is some cognitive changes or cognitive responses when you are faced with a stressor. Okay, so Linkages between stress and a psychological disorder. So one is burnout. This um we have been experiencing burnout, but we are not really actually aware of it, no? Burnout is an intensifying pattern of physical and psychological dysfunction due to a continuous flow of stressor or to chronic stress. People experiencing burnout may become uncharacteristically apathetic, impulsive, accident prone, irritable, and depressed. Burnout usually happens in a workplace. Okay? Na bitaw na sobraan na kay kag trabaho, daghan na kay demands sa trabaho, ang pressure sa trabaho, and then wala kay makita bitaw nga murag satisfaction gikan sa imong trabaho, daghan na kay problema sa ibuhang trabaho, usually you will be experiencing burnout. This burnout is not exclusive to people who have jobs. Again, even students experiences burnout. Okay, kung ang sa mga tao nga naay work burnout experience nila, ganahan na sila muundang, dili na sila bitaw kanang efficient sa ilahang work, ana-ana. So those are the possible effects of burnout or the possible symptoms of burnout. Sa students pud makita pud na sila, wala na sila gana mo answer sa ilahang mga quizzes, exams, ganahan sila muundang, wala na sila satisfaction makuha kay tungod sa stress nga gihatag sa pagskwela. This burnout is actually very this is actually some kind of a thing that we must really kana bitang try to look into, especially during this pandemic na very po demanding kayo ang pandemic karon. There might be people who are now experiencing burnout, not just students, not just workers, no, but other people as well who have some works, or not just teachers but also other people who have some various works. Okay, so that is burnout. Okay. Next, we have a post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, this is um, one of the most famous, stress-related disorder. So it is a pattern of severe negative reactions following a traumatic event. It may include anxiety, irritability, jumpiness, poor concentration, sexual problems, impaired social relationship, sleep disturbances, and suppressed immune system functioning. Sufferers often relieve the original trauma in nightmares or vivid memories, or rarely in flashbacks, where the person behaves as if the trauma is actually occurring again. The post-traumatic stress disorder is a very, very serious and a very, very haunting na psychological disorder. Okay, because usually people who have PTSD often, as what I have just said earlier, often relieve in the moment of the trauma. Okay, basically, there is a possibility that they are thinking that the traumatic event is actually happening again. Okay, many different stressors actually kana bitaw causes post-traumatic stress disorder. We have war, we have calamities, we have abuse, we have harassment. So anything that is said to be traumatic to that individual, or that is said to be traumatic in nature, could actually cause post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. No, so diri po to ma if people who have PTSD also usually ruminate. Grabe tong they usually remember things bisag wala nila tuyo. Okay, usually na sila ay nightmares, mo ni sila mga over vigilant kaayo. Okay, so and PTSD is a very real na disorder, and we really have to be very understanding and careful of what the PTSD actually, especially if we have, or if we know people who are diagnosed with such disorder. We really have to be very much aware that um, even if no they are undergoing helpful therapy, no, in order for them to alleviate the PTSD of them, we really have to be very careful, because sometimes we cannot say, no, nga ang kanang PTSD dapat ra ba na siya mga maghulat lang nga triggers bitaw nga mag pak gamay ang ana lang, wala na, mabuhi na pud balik tong traumatic event sa iya, ha madumduman na pud niya. Okay, and then may experience po din na niyang PTSD. Okay, I guess I was able to talk about the PTSD story sa kuan, sa previous na ko nga discussion no about atong soldier nga niulig ka ng celebration sa ilaha. It was New Year, and then bag-o ra to siya nga kuan, bag-o ra to siya nga bag-o ra to siya nga gikan og war, and then eventually um nibuto ang katong fireworks niya, gadala-dala siya og naa siya pusil gidala kay igor aligi siya ni hapitin mo balik na dayon niya pagbuto sa firework marag na remember din siya nagka-flashback na dayon dito din niya nadumduma abinyag na pa siya sa battlefield, and then nakita niya iya ang family abinyag ang kalaban niya gipamusil tanan. Okay, that is an example of what PTSD could actually bring to people. Okay, no, you will lose your sense of reality, and that is very um very sad. Okay, so that is PTSD. Okay, so this diathesis stress approach is a kind of a theory that actually tries to explain, okay, how do these stress-related disorder or different psychological disorders happen. It is said, no, that certain people are actually predisposed to develop certain disorders, but whether or not the disorder develop depends on the frequency, nature, and intensity of the stressor that people encounter. Okay, so sabi pasabot in diathesis stress approach. Usually daw, there are people, or even kita, there's a possibility na, for example, mao ni siya ang ato ang um, full bitaw nga person as a person kani kita ta. Okay, diathesis stress approach talks is just like this. Kung kani siya na itubig, okay, usually daw we are already predisposed with half of this water. Okay. So, nanay tubig dari. Meaning to say, kana siya nga mag portion sa field nga tubig, mao na siya ang bitag percentage sa psychological disorder or certain disorder nga naata. Ang kaning wala pa napuno, it now depends on the different triggers and stressors ang mupuno na dayon ana. Once nga kani siya mapuno, then basically, kato na dayon, we now develop the psychological disorder. Okay, so we are predisposed with a certain amount, no, certain amount, gid ba? We're already predisposed, no, with this kind of disorder. Okay, it's just that we are just waiting for the trigger or stressor, or we're just waiting for that switch, bitaw to feel that that missing kung ay tama ka develop og psychological disorder. That is diathesis stress approach. Okay. So, what are the different stressors, stress mediators, or some things that could actually be done in order to mediate the stress? O- Okay, unsa man? So, how stress are perceived. So, this is what I would like everyone to remember, no? That it is not actually stress that kills people, but it is actually how people react to stress. Okay, so it is not really stress that kills again people or that kills you, but it is how people reacts to it. Okay, it is actually about how you perceive stress. Okay, cognitive appraisal plays a very big role in the stress reactions of people because cognitive appraisal, this is how people have individual and subjective perception about stress. Okay, hardy people view stress as adversities as challenges rather than threats. Thus, they can cope better with it. Because usually, if there are people who see stress as a kind of a hurdle or challenge, no, that could make them be better. But there are also people who see stressors as a kind of a dead end. Okay, na mao na dito siya tanan. Okay, so cognitive appraisal actually really has this big and important role when it comes to the different reactions of stress by different people. Okay. So self-efficacy is the belief that you can perform some behavior could also affect appraisal. As what I've said, self-efficacy, earlier sa akong previous nga discussion, self-efficacy talks about knowing your strength and knowing your weaknesses. This could also help in your cognitive appraisal. Okay. So next we have is predictability and control. Okay, predictability, no? Makagamay na siya stress because knowing when will the stress happens, basically, inyo na siya makontrol. Okay. So, for example, 'di ba? Kung asa may mas stressful sa inyo ka ng quiz nga announce or surprise quiz, 'di ba? Mas ganahan pa mag quiz nga announce, no? Kay at least maka-prepare pa mo. At least ang stress nga ihatag sa stressor gamay na lang kay naka-prepare naman mo. It is already predicted. Kaysa sa kanang surprise nga quiz nga wala ka kabalo kung kano sa mahitabo. Okay, ignan lang bitaw mo nga. Okay, sometime this week mag-surprise quiz ko guys ha. Ana na patay na dayon, 'di ba? Maglisod maglisod na dayon og kanang makulba-kulbaan na dayon. Okay. So predictability lessens the impact of strong and brief stressors. Okay? The perception of control as well. That one can control a stressor, whether accurate or not, reduces its impact. People who believe they cannot control stressors are especially prone to physical and psychological problems. Okay, so basically, if we knew what we are stressful about, and if we think and we can actually do something about that stressor, then basically, the stressor, that is actually one of the possible things that we could do to mediate the effects of stress. Okay. So, for ikaw, katulaging quiz. Diba, kabalo ba ka nga, makatuon ka ato. So, yeah. So, um, coping resources and coping methods. Being well equipped to minimize and respond to stressors requires coping resources and coping methods. Okay. Resources are very, very, very much important when it comes to coping with stress. Okay. Resources, may it be social resources, economical resources, financial resources. Time is also a resource and different methods as well. Okay, one we have is problem focused or problem focused coping method. Okay, this try to alter or eliminate the source of stress. Okay, now if ever the source of stress is out of control, some people uses emotion focused coping strategy wherein they try to regulate the negative emotional consequences of the stress. Okay. So usually what people usually do is that they are usually first problem focused. Okay, kaya problem focus sa if we try to if we are able to control the problem itself or the stressor itself, then basically that's good. But there are times that you cannot control a situation and the only thing that you can control is yourself. Then that's the time emotion focused ang buhaton. Okay, wherein they try to lessen the impact or the emotional consequences of the stress. Okay. So, social, as what I've said, 'di ba? Resources. Social support is actually a resource, no? It consists of emotional, tangible, or informational resource provided by other people. The people one can depend on for support make up one social support network. So we cannot really disregard the fact that social support actually gives us strength when it comes to different stress, that distress that we are actually experiencing, from family to friends to closest friends to barkadas to uyab to any social support can do, to your church mates, okay, to your kisamandara kafrat or sa badira, okay, sororities, okay, this could also be social support. Okay, next is stress, personality, and gender. Okay, so dispositional optimism is a belief that things will work out well, is an especially strong stress buffering effect even against the physical wear and tear stressors can cause. um Usually, what happens is that when we there is this what we call kasi as toxic bitaw nga, toxic na toxic optimism. Okay, so this toxic positive, the toxic side of positivity, no, wherein even though yes, optimism or positive thinking could actually be helpful, wherein we thought that everything works well, no, and it actually buffers stress. However, manggod, This toxic positivity or toxic optimism is not all might happen when we always indulge, or when we always try to say to ourselves that everything will work out fine, everything happens for a reason, and everything usually um everything will work out well, no? Kana bitaw. For example, may ko, dili na gyud kayo nakakaya, friend. Di na gyud ako kaya. Sakit na jud kaayo. Labad na jud ako ulo. Anxious na kay ko ana din moingon din na imong friend nga. Friend, positive thinking lang gyud. Makaya ra lagi na nimo. Makuha ra gyud nimo tanan imong gusto, ana. Okay, now that is toxic positivity na dayon. Compare me inana imong answer. Why? Because as human as we are, it is valid that we experience negative emotions. Now, if we try to invalidate our own negative emotions, it's not that we are forgetting them, we are neglecting them, and we are not addressing them well. Mas dako pa yun imong problema, anak, kay magpabili na siya dira, unaddressed. You thought that it is helping, you thought that it is helpful, or you thought that it is helping, but it is really not helping at all. Because what you are doing is not properly addressing what your emotions are, but rather denying what you are actually feeling. Okay, we are all individuals. It is okay to be not okay. It is really, really okay to feel anxious. Okay, it is okay to feel stressed because that is a part of the human life. Okay, wala man siguro person dali nga wala gyud naka-feel or experience of anxiety, sadness, or kanang mga ana nga feelings or negative feelings, because we are all humans and that is a valid way of feeling. Okay, what we have to do is to actually try to look for ways to address those feelings. What can we possibly do in order to alleviate those feelings? Okay, do not be optimistic all of the time, because sometimes mawala ta sa realidad. Okay, not really something bad usually happens. Okay, there are bad things that could happen. Okay, so the thing that we could do here is that we should actually be aware of the person that is experiencing things. So, um, I know it must be tough. Okay, for example, may siya nga, anxious na kayo ko, kulbaan na kayo ko. I know it must be hard for you. No? So, what are the things that you could possibly do about that? What are the things that you are currently doing to address that situation? Okay, kana siya. Okay, or try to make them realize that, do you think that what you are thinking right now actually helps you? Then what could you possibly do to make you feel at ease? Or why can't you try, why won't you try doing that? Okay, so those are the possible responses that you could actually say to people in order for them to help cope with stress, or if ever nga naman ganit sila stressful nga experiences. Okay, so again ha, no to toxic positivity. Okay, next we have is gender. Gender may affect people's stress responses. In general, men tend to get angry and or avoid stressors, and women tend to help others and use social support, tend and befriend and fight or flight. So, is this true, boys, girls? Okay, so there are really gender differences when it comes to stress reactions, no? And gender usually plays a role when it comes to the mediation of stress. Okay, so we also have type A and type B behavior pattern, no? So originally was defined as describing a person who was competitive, achievement oriented, impatient, easily aroused, often hostile and angry, who work at many tasks at the same time, is a type A behavior pattern. Meanwhile, a person with a type B behavior pattern is described as relaxed and easygoing. Now, for nearly 20 years, many studies found a positive relationship between coronary heart disease and behaviors typical of the type A personality behavior. So you really have to chill. You have to step it up. Really step it up. You really have to bitong take time, no, for yourself. It is not a competition, no. It is not usually. You have to see for yourself that we all have our own pacing. Okay, we all have our own pacing. If we could do things in our way, you should always do things your way. You should not be pressured that someone is already having this. You should have pressure, and then you must be on top of them. Ana-ana, competitive kaayo ba? You don't have to be like that all of the time because research suggests that type A behavioral pattern usually develops stress more, stress more compared to type B people. Okay. No? Okay. So, changing health behaviors is the stages of readiness. Okay. So, James Prochaska and colleagues contend that successful change involves 5 stages that may have to be repeated numerous times. Okay. So, these changes or kuan magud di siya. This is something um ang kaning kani siya kani bitang change bitaw is this is something that you usually do, okay, for some people who are um experiencing different behavioral problems. Okay, kani siya nga stages. Usually ginapa kuan ni sila ginapa inculcate ni sila sa kanang mga usually substance abuse users or kana sila. Usually sila gid ako makita nga mag-isa po ani. But then there are people no who might be their behavioral patterns actually kana bitang is actually affected because sometimes what they see as stressor dili nila makita nga stressor, and it is actually eating them already. Okay, so for example, pre-contemplation. The first stage is pre-contemplation. The person perceives no threat and does not plan to change it. This is where the problem starts because usually realization comes from the person, and the moment that that person sees no threat about something that is a threat to him, then that is really hard to change. That is a very hard person to change. Not only then that contemplation happens wherein the person is now aware of the problem or the problem of the behavior itself and is now thinking about changing it, the change is now starting to happen. Okay? Okay. So, nana siya thought into changing it. But in preparation, the intention na dayon ang mahitabo. Okay? Action is where this person is successfully making a behavioral change, while maintenance is usually the behavior has continued for at least 6 months and the person is using newly learned skills to prevent the relapse of such behavior. Okay. So, that is the stages of readiness by James Prochaska. We also have cognitive coping strategies. This is changing how people think about stressors, no? Okay, so in cognitive restructuring, catastrophic thinking is replaced with more constructive thinking. Stressors are not eliminated but perceived as less threatening and so are less disruptive. Okay, so emotional coping strategies such as seeking social support provides buffers against stress's ill effects. Okay, now this is something that I want you to do. Okay, this is one of the activities that I actually want you to answer. Cognitive restructuring. Okay, cognitive restructuring works like this. Okay, there is a situation, thought, feelings. Mao na siyang first na dayon. Evidence that supports the thought or initial thought, evidence that doesn't support the thought, alternative or the balanced thought, and then the outcome. Okay, now usually cognitive restructuring, what we are trying to restructure here is the thought, because once we actually restructure the thought, the feelings will also change. Okay, now the situation is like this. Some friends are going out to dinner this weekend and I wasn't invited. So what you are thinking now is your friends don't like you. They think you are boring and you will end up having no friends. So what you will experience or what will you feel about that is that you will be sad, disliked, alone, and stressed. Okay. Now, evidence that supports the thought that they don't like you. So, you think na dahil nga you get moody every now and then, or kanabitong dili ka makasabay sa ilaha, ana. Okay, so, hala, kung na nakalihas na aman, na siya, no? But then, you also think about an evidence that doesn't support the thought itself. So my friends have told me several times that they think that I am fun and that I make them laugh. Other friends have not been invited to other activities. I do get invited to most things. So there are other friends nga wala man pud na invite. And then they also tell me, or they also told me before nga ganahan man sila nako as a person, ana-ana. No? So wala siya ga support sa thought nimo nga they don't like you. Now, this is where from that support or from that support that doesn't from that evidence that doesn't support the thought that your friends don't like you can get no a restructured thinking or restructured or a balanced thought na dayon from that. So my friends like me, but that doesn't mean that they have to invite me to everything. So the outcome of which is you feel happier and you no longer feel stressed about it. Okay, it is a process. It is a process, but it could really help people. No, kaning cognitive restructuring. Mm-hmm. And I will give you some questions. I will give you some situations with regards to this cognitive restructuring. Okay, so another activity. Last activity na po din ako siya. Actually, don't worry. Oh, I did I some of the last activities something. Okay. Now, another situation. I made suggestion at the weekly meeting and most people thought it wasn't a good idea. And then you think na dahil that you have no good idea and that people think that you are stupid and that you are terrible at your work. And then you will feel anxious, disrespected, stupid, and stressed. So what are the evidences that supports your thought that that some people think you're stupid and you're terrible at work? You know, some coworkers pointed out that we don't have enough resources to implement my idea. That's why it became stupid for me. However, a few people think that it was a good idea. I often get complimented on my ability to think outside the box. Okay, and mine was not the only idea that the group didn't like. People tell me they like the way I work. I usually do a good job. Okay, so from that evidence that doesn't support the thought, you can now restructure your thought. So people at work think that I am capable of having good ideas. So I do my work well, but this wasn't one of my best ideas. Okay, so I feel calmer and I no longer feel stressed about this. Okay, so what I will be giving you is a situation lang. Okay, a situation lang, and then try to put yourself into the shoes of others. Okay, on that situation. You try to put yourself into that shoes bitaw sa kana naka-experience ana nga situation and try to see kung unsa imong thought, unsa ang possible thoughts, unsa ang feelings ana nila dayon. Okay, and then from that na dayon. Okay, so yeah. So, there are also different stress inoculation techniques which is designed to reduce stress. So, a particularly effective approach to dealing with stress is stress inoculation. So, Donald Baum described three phases of stress inoculation. We have education, rehearsal, and implementation. Education phase is the specific information about what to expect is given to the individual. For instance, someone going to the hospital for an operation is able to cope better if he or she knows exactly what to expect. Another thing, if you are already told that you have an upcoming report and you are assigned for that report tomorrow, you actually have a good bitaw nga or a better coping strategy on the stressor that was given to you. No, nag-assume na ko nga stressor ang reporting. Okay, so education phase. Rehearsal phase is the person practices the threatening event in a safe surrounding. For example, if someone needs to give a talk to a group of people, they rehearse at home until they are confident. So, for example, if you are assigned with a report, sa bahay palandaan, imo na nang i-rehearse imong report, kay para at least, pag abot sa reporting gid nga day, you feel confident na, more or less. Okay. Implementation phase is the person now actually carries out the plan, hopefully with enough knowledge and rehearsal. So what you did with your rehearsal and what you get from the education phase, dili na nimo sa implementation phase sa din buhaton. Okay? So again, education phase, knowing the stressor, knowing what the possible stressors are. Rehearsal phase, is to practice, no? Practice how can you handle that threatening event in a safe environment or in a safe surrounding. Okay. So, these are the following ineffective strategies, no, for coping with stressors that we usually think that is actually helpful. First is we have procrastination or delaying task. It simply does not do something to remove the stressor. It is just prolonging the agony. It is just prolonging the stressor hinoon. You must not delay your task because it is just prolonging. Di na naman walang stressor, guys. Naara na siya dira. Magkaway-kaway na siya sa imuha kung mag-procrastinate ka. Okay, sometimes people thinks anya ra na siya oy kay wa pa bitay deadline anya na pag-abot sa deadline na stress ay noon kag samot kay taas di ka siya ansiranan, procrastinate pa more. Okay, anxiety is a general feeling of tension, apprehension, and dread that involves predictable physiological changes. Actually, anxiety is there is a positive anxiety that actually helps people become productive, but another anxiety could also the negative anxiety is what actually stresses out people. Okay. So yeah. Aggression is a maladaptive reaction to stressor that may harm others. So the frustration aggression hypothesis believes that aggression can be caused by frustration or the blocking of a particular goal. Kana bitong you aggressive na hinuon ko sa ubang tao because mura nakauga project ito sa imong feelings, and that you are thinking that if you become aggressive, if you project your negative feelings or your negative attitude towards other people, then basically mawala na sa imuha. And that is not good. Okay? Okay. Hala, that is the end of the slide na pala, and that is the end of the report na pala. Now, there are many things, no? There are different people usually have different kinds of coping strategies. Okay? However, I want you to take into account as well that not all coping strategies is actually applicable to all people. Okay? For example, some people actually undergo stress eating. Okay, ganun sila when people when people is under stress, they eat. Okay. So na iyo ba ana? Okay, para at least mabugnaw-bugnaw nilang panghuna-huna, but then that does not always apply to all people. Okay. Napoy uban nga they meditate. Oh, every time may uban ikabalo mag-meditate. Okay. It is good though to suggest what you are doing when you cope, okay, with stress. Again, the problem there is that you must not impose what you are doing. Suggestion is good. You might say nga, uy, itry ni, kay kani akong ginahimo when ma-stress ko, ana-ana siya. Okay. But you know what, guys? The usual this is okay for ako ha. Mag-suggest ko sa inyo when I feel stress, what I usually do is that the moment I know that a stressor is coming or the moment bitaw I know nga na ipadulungay nga stress, what I usually do is that before I try to face the stress itself or the stressor itself, I usually sleep muna. Sleeps ako, and then I just try to make my body feel rejuvenated, ana-ana. Matulog sa gyud ko. After ana, pag mata nako, ayha na ako trabahoon ang katong mga stressful nga trabaho nako. Okay, that is one of my suggestions that you could do. Okay, and then kanipod, you could actually write the things that you are about to do. Okay? So nawala mo to ko listahan oy. Pero I usually write the things ngano bitong mga post-it kana sila that is also very very much helpful for you to keep intact or to attack na to keep in track on the things that you must do para dili ka mawala sa imong passing. Okay? Ako usually makaon man ko, stress eating, ice cream usually para mabugnaw na ako nauna, pero karon kay di naman kita kagawas-gawas so wala na siya. So ako yung ginahimo karon is that I sleep, I let myself rest, and then once I rest enough, ay hara din ko magtrabaho. Dili na ko biya na trabaho. Dili na ko dili himuon. Ako siyang himuon, but I let myself rest muna before I face the stressor. Okay, that is the usual thing that I do. However, we have different ways of coping with stress, and if that kind of coping is effective sa inyo, then I applaud you. because you are doing great. So I hope you guys are enlightened, or uh, um excuse me. I hope you guys have learned something about stress and the different kinds of coping strategies and ineffective coping strategies. So again, um ang ako ang sa ito ganyo wala na tay forum for this topic, no, wala, dili na ako magpa-forum ani nga topic kay medyo kuan na kaayo. However, I will just give you some activities when it comes to stress and coping. So katong cognitive restructuring. Okay, I will try to see how well you are on restructuring your cognition onto certain situations. Okay, don't worry, dili ka siya taas. Okay, so again, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much, and I hope you understand that many people are not stressed nowadays, and it is really up to us na dayon, no, to help ourselves. You should not sito gano'n, huwag mo pabayaan yung sarili nyo. Huwag kayong pasusuntok sa COVID. Ano po ito, isa na ako kasasyante. Huwag kayong pasuntok sa COVID. Okay? So, thank you guys, and I hope you are well and have a great day. So, ciao.